One horse to remember for the rest of your life. Which one would it be?
This is unbelievable! Zenyatta!
All comers, all grounds, all beaten. Franco won the Champion Stakes.
A Triple Crown winner! A Breeders' Cup winner! A horse of a lifetime!
Everyone would give a different answer, but those unforgettable names usually fall into two kinds. The first are the obvious champion. Their greatness feels inevitable, power is their nature, and victory is simply what they do. Half measures never suit them. Only overwhelming dominance can ignite that kind of feverish admiration. Then there's another kind of great horse. They were not strong. No, they were strong, but they do not always tower over their generation. They could be doubted, sometimes underestimated, and because of that, when they win a race people think it is impossible, that shock eclipses the race itself. Those moments bring true emotion, excitement, and hope. And Orfevre is both of them combined. To some, he was the greatest of heroes. To others, he was... That's who he was. Orfevre, a horse of greatness, but we're now in 2010. Under the care of his trainer, he awakened a fierce competitive spirit. Unfortunately, not against other horses. He was way more interested in making life miserable for people around him. So question, in the race where he threw his jockey off, did he win or lose? The answer is, he won. Because his real opponent wasn't the horses on the track, it was his jockey on his back. That was Orfevre, a horse once considered unremarkable in every way except for his ability to get into trouble, and eventually became the strongest horse. But right now, we can only watch him going far, far away from his destiny. Previously, after the success of Dream Journey, Oriental R also began attracting attention. 2007, she was scheduled to be bred with Deep Impact. However, the mating failed 3 times because of the unique breeding cycle in horse racing. If a mare failed to conceive by mid-year, she had to remain empty until the next season. This is to prevent foals from being born too late that they actually have physical disadvantage. To avoid losing an entire year, the farm decided to send Oriental R back to State Gold. And just as usual, one shot pregnant. But because it took 4 times for the pregnancy, the foal would be born much later. Not only that, in order to catch up the birth window, he was delivered by cesarean section, making him much weaker than other horses. His father was also changed from Deep Impact to State Gold. As a result, this tiny chestnut was not really favored. Compared to his brother, this foal seemed to inherit more from his mother. Of course, because his brother was Dream Journey, expectations still exist. But to be honest, few believe he would become extraordinary. Every horse needs a name, so this chestnut inherited a name that took parts of both his parents, Oriental R combined with State Gold. Orfevre it is, the word goldsmith in French. Now, I won't hide the fact that I'm bad at French, so sometimes I'm just gonna call him Orfevre. It's not that I have anything against French, it's just... I also like curry croissant.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que cette merde? Qu'est-ce que c'est que cette merde? Pourquoi toute cette question? C'est ma recette spéciale de croissant. Eh vas-y, les Japonais, je vais leur déclarer la guerre.
Many people know Orfevre as the Golden Tyrant. Golden is easy to understand. Beside the name, whenever sunlight fell across his coat. To say he's a chestnut, he literally was plated in gold. Very beautiful. As for the tyrant part, someone would soon find that part out. The team began to take shape. Orfevre entered the same stable as his brother. All that remained was for the right jockey to step onto the stage. At the time, Ikezoe heard this was Dream Journey's brother, so he volunteered for that role. Very bold decision, given how much he had suffered from Journey, and Orfevre did not disappoint us from the very beginning. At the time, people were curious about this Dream Journey's brother, and after it began, like Journey, this horse was unsurprisingly small. Every time the other made a stride, he needed to make 1.5 to catch up. That said, he was very fast. When he accelerated, it looked at someone flip on a speed boost. He opened a commanding leap at the final straight, so Ikezue raised the whip to urge him, and that single strike completely launched Orfevre into an even faster speed that made the younger audience go, "Wow, why is he not running straight?" And then the older fan said, "First time, huh?" Of course, the real highlight did not begin yet. Despite winning the debut, Orfevre's behavior was something else, throwing a tantrum in the paddock, drifting across the track in the race, and after crossing the line, he threw Ikezue off his back, stepped onto him that left a scar remain to this day. This series of incidents forced the post-race photo to be cancelled. The Tyrant appeared. Even with the family tradition, just the first race, he became a problem child. And so this problematic horse and his poor jockey, their destiny was forever intertwined from the very beginning. As Ikezue once said, "Whatever doesn't kill me only makes me stronger." Surely, after such hardship, this horse would begin to win, or at least would not do it again, right? However, Orfevre was in a painful losing streak afterward. He is too childish. At this rate, it would be hard for him to win anything. Thanks to his golden heritage, this kind of result was expected. But if you really dig deep into the reasoning, all racehorses born in the Northern Hemisphere share an official birthday of January the 1st. Orfevre, who was born in May, was nearly half a year younger than others. Not only was he noticeably smaller than his peers, but also mentally, he wasn't ready to compete. In one of the races, he was even humored by the announcer.
さあ、オルフェーブルがうまくスタートできるんでありましょうか。あ、今日はうまく出ました。
If you had told anyone back then that this horse would one day become a triple crown and accomplish greatness, everyone probably would have laughed away. And this is where I have so much respect for the jockey Ikezue. If you have watched the Journey video, you probably know this is a jockey with character. I wouldn't call him a top jockey, however, anyone in this role would think of risk and return. It would have been completely reasonable for Ikezue to say, "Sorry, I'm not riding this horse," or for the trainer to simply replace him with another jockey. Although Ikezue was approaching the prime of his career, he still was not a top-tier jockey. Yet trainer Ike suggests, just as a horse can learn from a jockey can also learn from a horse. What they wanted was for the two of them to discover each other and teach each other who they really were. A horse, a man, and a victim. This was how everything began. And not long after, 2011, in Japan, something enormous took place. March 11, the darkest Friday for Japan, the largest recorded natural disaster struck. A massive earthquake tore through the earth, followed by a catastrophic tsunami and a nuclear crisis. Together, they formed one of the most devastating disasters in modern age. Entire northeast of the nation collapsed, cities vanished underwater, homes and lives were swept away in minutes. The Japanese Tenno, who had ascended the throne in 1989, for the first time in history, decided to address the nation on television, urging the people to endure and rebuild. In the disaster zone, the view was unbearable. Collapsed building, flooded street, endless debris. Families who had lost everything wandered through the ruins, searching for answers. Televisions across the country continue updating death tolls. And in one corner of the evacuation shelter, a small television was still on, broadcasting horse racing. When the nation needed a hero, many of them stepped onto the stage. And days later, people saw a flash. A horse ran freely upon the track. In a single burst, he ended his long losing streak. As he began to slow down, sunlight poured down upon him, casting a golden glow across his body. Divinely gorgeous. At that moment, the entire nation didn't know what this tiny chestnut would come to mean in a year filled with tragedy. The first leg of the Triple Crown, Satsuki-sho. Because of the earthquake, the race had to be moved from Nakayama to Tokyo Racecourse. This generation is the first gem of Deep Impact and Heart's Cry offspring. On top of that, King Kame and Stay Gold was also firing up with their children. With all of these champion sire active, 2011 became an extremely rare two Hall of Fame generation. So arriving at the classic, Orfevre was far from the favorite. His brother Dream Journey had never performed well in Tokyo. On top of that, the Stego line was also famous for late maturity, making them inactive during the classic season. It's interesting to be noted, although the classic are meant for the 3-year-old, Orfevre was born in May, meaning he was technically still a 2-year-old. Everything suggested defeat for Orfevre, but by this point, he no longer feared anyone. The audience saw a tiny chestnut break out of the field, overcame every disadvantage and won the race 3 lengths clear, a dominant victory. After the race, Ikechoi said he had never felt the final straight at Tokyo was so short. Next came the most important race of the Triple Crown series, the Japan Derby. This time, Orfevre entered as the favorite, but on race day, a typhoon swept across Japan, making the track into one of the softest surfaces in Derby history. Part of the course quite literally was down to dirt, and what followed would become another iconic race for Orfevre. Not only was he heavily marked by other rivals, but also at the final straight, he was completely boxed in the front, outside, and inside. When he tried to force an opening, he was then bumped hard, nearly causing the jockey to fall off. But Orfevre refused to back down. After not one, but several devastating checks, he still found a small opening to break out of the pack. At the same time, another horse began his charge. Wind Variation, who had enjoyed a clean trip, suddenly accelerated. His jockey Ando understood Orfevre had a bad habit of relaxing too early before the finish, so he timed his move precisely for that moment. The final straight became completely a two-horse showdown. Even the third-place finisher was a future Japan Cup third champion. Wind Variation still was ahead of him by 7 lengths. For many horsemen, Derby is their lifelong dream. Most of them will spend their entire career and still never could win this race. But not only did Orfevre overcome the Derby under a nightmare scenario, he also turned every disadvantage into a dominant victory. The sectional time shows that only Orfevre and Wind Variation's final section was in the 34th. Every other horse was at least 2 seconds slower. How enormous that difference was. The legendary performance that made Deep Impact famous had a 1.5 second faster time than the second best closer, and that was already flying. A gap exceeding 2 seconds wasn't just dominance. There were almost only 2 horses on the field. This derby also was the highest rated derby. That mischievous troublemaker who had once been dismissed by people was now doing the impossible one after another, inspiring those who lost hope in life. And after summer, finishing another commanding victory over Wind Variation, Ikechoi invited fans to come witness at the final stage of the classic to a new Triple Crown winner. The Triple Crown, a title forged not by a single moment of brilliance, but by the proof of absolute greatness. To win it, a horse must be strong anywhere, at any distance, against anyone. Before that, many have stood at the edge of that summit, but only 6 had succeeded. Sandlight, Shinzan, Mr. CB, Symboli Rudolph, Narita Bryan, Deep Impact. Now, Orfevre stood at the edge of joining them. 2011 Kikasho. Orfevre was the overwhelming favorite. Wind Variation was the second, but the odds was by no means close. Everyone was marking Orfevre. I don't want to say it was a sure thing for him to win, but the team was just brimming with confidence. This is a Triple Crown horse. So instead of focusing on the result, let's talk about Orfevre's winning strategy. If you play a certain horse girl game, you might be familiar with the 4 common racing styles: front, stalking, mid-pack surging, and end closing. Because after centuries of development, pacing strategy has been studied thoroughly. Different strategy has its own good, which makes even the smallest misjudgment able to change the outcome of the race. When the pace is fast, it tends to favor horses from the back, but when the pace is slow, it becomes much more difficult for the closer to win. Since the difference in top speed between horses is usually minimal under slow tempo. While many people think of Orfevre as a closer, there was actually a 5th strategy. Makuri, a strategy that ignores the pace entirely. It means launching an aggressive move as early as the 3rd turn, swinging wide and accelerating way early. By the time the field reaches home, the horse is already at the front. Just the idea of that is difficult enough. Traditionally, a thoroughbred can usually sustain maximum speed for about 400 meters, but Makuli demands far more than just that. A horse must run a longer distance than everyone else, accelerate through a wider turn at greater speed, and initiate a move so early that it disrupted the rhythm of every other horses. In wrestling terms, that's like Alexander Karelin picking up his opponent. Unless the horse was overwhelmingly better than its rivals, you simply rarely see it. And Orfevre was definitely better than everyone else. By the final turn, he already charged to the front. The entire straight became a solitary run, the gap growing larger and larger. Even if Kezoi began easing early, the final time still came 0.1 second of the record. Just like the call from Okaya-san, the golden horse is flying down the track.
独走になるのかオルフェーブル、外から当選だ。しかし抜けたオルフェーブル、金色の馬体が弾んでいる。オルフェーブル先頭、これを追う者はなし。オルフェーブルだ。そして2番手にはハーバーコマンドだ。オルフェーブルだ。これが第7代の三冠馬だ。オルフェーブル、おめでとうオルフェーブル、三冠達成。
But just as the crowd was in celebration, Orfevre immediately threw Kezoi off without hesitation. The audience did not realize what just happened, continued cheering. Commentator Okayas was saying, just like his debut race, I've never seen a triple crown like this before. But perhaps that's part of his cuteness. And from that moment on, the nickname Golden Tyrant began to spread.
これがいつものオルフェーブル、デビュー戦と同じようにこれもご愛嬌です。こんな三冠馬は初めてです。
Not long before, Orfevre had just been a horse trapped in a losing streak, but now he had not only claimed the Triple Crown, also a symbol of hope. The older fans were sending congrats to State Gold as well. After Mr. CB, not a single Triple Crown was born out of a Japanese sire. So for that troublemaker to give birth to a Triple Crown, it's like Rudolph telling a funny joke, nearly impossible. However, for a Triple Crown champion, there was still one final hill to climb. At the time, although Orfevre had defeated every rival, people considered him the obvious horse of the year. Some believed he would lose his next race, Arimakine. This prediction wasn't baseless. First, because of the earthquake, the Nakayama racecourse had not been part of his Triple Crown campaign. No one knew how well he would perform on this track that is more punishing for the closer. Second, up to that point, Orfevre had won entirely through raw physical superiority, but little on refined tactic. And the biggest challenge was that even for the All-Star Grand Prix, which assembled the best horses to compete, the 2011 field was the most competitive field in Arima history. Legends such as Buena Vista, Rose Kingdom, Victory Pizza, Acing Flash, Tosen Jordan, and Rulership were all present. Genuinely everyone who could have come had come. Although Orfevre was the biggest favorite, it should surprise no one if any other horses won. With the greatest field, many believe no way Orfevre could dominate the race the way as usual. At very least, this field of world-class elite would push him to his very limit. But after the race, final result, total annihilation.
2コーナーへと向かっていきます。 1000m の通過タイムはなんと1分3秒8、超スローペースに押している今年の有馬記念。
When the field passed the 1,000 meter mark, as the crowd erupted in disbelief, everyone thought Orfevre was destined to lose. Sectional time around the turns were over 14 seconds, and if you read the lap time in Arima, you know this was death. Not once in the new century had the Arima been at such a crawling tempo. Not once had it come close to touch 14 seconds in the first two corners, and Orfevre was at last. Even Kezoi felt despair, trapped at the back of a field with elite rivals. Each and every one of them was confident in their finishing kick. To call it the most devastating moment was not an understatement. But when the crowd witnessed Orfevre once again launch an absurd acceleration that defied the conventional principle, once again using the long sprint to crush the stamina of the entire field, at that moment, I finally understood how Paul Felder felt at UFC 267. first-time viewer might even think winning this way against these champions was something simple. But in the past, not once could someone ever do this to them. To some experts, this is even seen as the greatest performance in Arima history over his second one. After the era of Deep Impact, many believe Japan would never again produce a Triple Crown such greatness. And less than 6 years, another Triple Crown, different style, but same dominance was witnessed. After this race, everyone began to compare him to the greats of the past. They knew the Triple Crown is only the beginning for him.
ここにある者たちはすべて非凡なる己が力を世に示した。その走りは確かに歴史に刻まれるほどであったのだろうな。だがそれは王なき時代の輝きに過ぎん。世界はまだ知らぬのだ。王の走りがもたらす真の好機ゆえに示す王たるは何かを我が波動に古今東西あまねく傑物を踏み越えてみせる王とすなわち世である。
Spring. When the earthquake struck, Nakayama Racecourse was shutting down. A tiny chestnut gave people a reason to believe. Autumn. The Golden Tyrant was crowned as a whole, igniting a nationwide excitement around the sport. Winter. Nakayama reopened. The absolute monarch returned to his loyal throne. It was an age of heroes. Whenever the nation needed a hero, someone would step forward to inspire them. The mantle of his champion found the way to Orfevre, and after the race ended, a bigger announcement sent fans into a greater frenzy. The following year, Orfevre would fulfill Japan's long-standing dream to conquer the Prix de l'Arc de Triomphe. Challenging the Arc. Even the idea alone was electrifying. A Triple Crown champion, rising in the midst of a national tragedy, carrying a dream that Japan had pursued for decades. Just the thought of that set the community on fire. But not everyone was swept away by the excitement. Behind the scene, many analysts were asking a far more cautious question. Would this really end well? If Orfevre won, it would be great, but if he failed, what would happen to the reputation of Japanese racing? And the horse himself would also sacrifice a great deal. He skipped the domestic races, all for the sake of one distant goal. If you're not familiar with this part of history, I actually have another video that explores it in detail. Those concerned spoke to how far that dream became. That land had truly been so far for so long. But after his first race of the season, people no longer ask if he could win. They began asking when.
3コーナーを目前にして先頭に立っています。今までに全くなかったケースです。オルフェーブル、これはどうなんでしょうか。第3コーナーを迎えている一添健一は懸命に斜めている。どうなんだアクシデント発生か。まさかのアクシデント発生か。オルフェーブル、足でも痛めたのか。交代した。なんとこんな姿だけは見たくなかったオルフェーブル。後ろから2投目。さあここからさらに巻き返していくのか。もう1回巻き返してくる。これはすごいレース、とんでもないレースになった。もう1回オルフェーブルが蘇ってきた。
During the race, Orfevre surged to the very front, but as the pack approached the final turn, without warning, he suddenly lost momentum and stopped entirely. The rest of the field seized the opportunity immediately, raising the tempo and launching their moves. Within seconds, Orfevre had fallen far behind. At that moment, he had effectively given 15 or so length, forcing to run over 100 extra meters. People would surely think the race was over, but then he chose to wake up and devour the ground with terrifying speed. Had he not been forced at the worst part of the track, he might very well have won. Following the race, JRA placed Orfevre under what was a training re-examination. The outcome of this evaluation would determine whether he would compete again. So it became the first and probably the only time in history that a Triple Crown had been subjected to this examination. Today, this race is often remembered as a comedic moment in his career, but at the time, it shattered people's understanding of racing logic. This view still had the defending champion and 2 technical winners, and Orfevre at his top was just doing things to other elites that confuses people. Fortunately, under enormous pressure, Orfevre passed the test. It's worth mentioning, the test was conducted on dirt, and Orfevre produced time so impressive that many thought he might excel on dirt. So with him being allowed back to the track, the team said, "Last time we embarrassed everyone, so in the technical show, I will repay you with victory." At the time, fans were like, "Man, I'm not gonna watch it. Did you not see his Kikasho in his previous race? In terms of raw ability, this horse might be the strongest in history." In fact, many were not just expecting victory, they were there to see if he could break Deep Impact's 2-mile world record. Life savings were betting on him, houses were betting on him. April 29th, 2012. On that day, Orfevre would deliver a lesson that every gambler remember for life. 11th finish, the worst of his career. 14.9 billion immediately vanished into thin air. Before the famous 12 billion incident, there was the 14 billion incident. After the race, Orfevre's team tried to determine what had gone wrong. In the end, their best guess was that Orfevre had been suffering from diarrhea, which drained his strength before the race. But some also thought it was simply that golden spirit back at it. If there are 4 words that describe Orfevre's career after the Triple Crown, they would be, "What are you doing?" And if you have 6 words, it would be, "What the hell are you doing?" Want to cure a gambling addiction? Just follow this bloodline. His next race, Takasakinen, is one of the less talked about races in Orfevre's career, but I think it was honestly so cool. Originally, the team had no intention of running the Takasakinen. Their plan was to prepare for the arc, but after the loss, some people were like, "We're all wrong. This horse isn't strong at all." So in order to defend the honor of a Triple Crown champion, they decided 4 days before the race that Orfevre would compete. When many people believe Orfevre was in his worst form, and under all disadvantage imaginable, he returned to the track and crushed the field once again. We lost previously, so we had to win it back next time, because that is what a Triple Crown champion does. A Triple Crown champion doesn't worry about excuses. A Triple Crown champion simply runs.
See that picture? I have that picture framed on metal, printed on metal in the gym, just to remind me of what a pussy I am.
Although Orfevre's 4-year-old was either throwing or on the way of throwing, this was honestly so cool. And then came the legendary arc. Where to even begin? For this campaign, the team made a change to replace the jockey with Sumion after Orfevre won his prep race. Although many teams were holding back for the main race, it was clear Orfevre was a horse able to win the arc. So seeing another superstar from Japan coming here, Franz Gallop was very pleasant and said, "Who is this horse?" At the time, the concept of international racing was still developing. Europe did not know very much about Japanese racing. They knew about the Japan Cup, and that accounted for half of their understanding. The second half was simply they knew Japan wanted to win the arc. But for Europe, the arc was also a matter of pride. The way each team prepared for this race was completely different from others. And with the withdrawal from Snow Fairy and Tangerine, remaining 18 horses, 9 of them are G1 winner. If Europe wanted to stop Orfevre from winning,
What? What's that? What is that?
Bro, that's the only way, bro.
they would either need a generational lock-in or for this horse to have a generational choke. And then, you can't even make this up. They got both of them. Barrier selection, gate 18, the gate of death at Longshan. I honestly can't recall a single horse that has ever won the arc from that draw. Then there was the track condition, one of the softest in the 21st century, terrible for the high-speed running style typical of Japanese horses. When the race began, Orfevre settled all the way at the rear. Understandable, but still very few horses capable of winning the arc from last to first. And yet, under all these unfavorable conditions, Japan still had hope. At the final straight, Orfevre began to unleash his incredible power, surging forward and past every single horse with ease. Victory was within reach, and then Europe began the lock-in. The long shot Sulemia suddenly produced the greatest run of her career. Her jockey, Olivier Petier, also delivered one of the finest rides of his life. And at the worst possible moment, that thing sitting on Orfevre's neck stopped working again. Just as victory was about to be secure, he began drifting inward. But this is still fine. He can run in as long as he...
And they've got the video, and guys, this is not funny. Don't laugh at this video when I start playing it. This is not this is not funny. Don't look. Don't look at what's happening to the lady right She called the
I don't want to say Japan is unlucky at the arc, but boy, if you know people's reaction back then. Fans were looking at the scene and looking at each other saying, is this r/that really happen right now? Are we living in a 2007 Tumblr post? Everyone was tweeting on Twitter. People who never used Twitter was tweeting about it. The community absolutely exploded, which I can't blame them for. The things they were talking about are still talked about today. There are also the memes. The amount of memes. Orfevre does not take the arc because it does not respect the arc. It was chaos at its best form, but in truth, his action was somewhat expected by the fans. I mean, just look at what he did. Just look at what his family did. I don't know the total amount of money, but he's gotta set an all-time high for the largest throw in one calendar year, and it will be very hard to top. And if you think the throw ended there, don't worry, there's still the next race. After the arc, trainer EK reflected, because Orfevre was too powerful, even run him on flat ground could hurt himself, so much of his training had been conducted on narrow uphill gallop. As a result, causing him unfamiliar in the inexperienced open home straight. Still, he promised, we will train him to run in straight. I promise. Promise. And then the next race. Back to the story, we arrive at the Japan Cup. Once again, it became a legendary race. Just how many legendary moments do you need to leave Orfevre? And once again, it's one of the greatest field of the Japan Cup. 17 runners, every single one was a stake winner. The early 2010s truly live up to be one of the most competitive period. Just looking at the names that appear in the Umamusume, Gentle Donna Orfevre rulership, Tosin Jordan, Asian Flash, Rose Kingdom, phenomenal. A lineup felt almost too perfect to be real. In my opinion, only the 2014 JC might top this field in scale. What made the race even more special was how each of these greats showed their distinct personality on the track. There was rulership being rulership, gentle donut executing a race that was clever and brutally efficient. Every horse on the track gave everything to win. If there was only one regret, it was Orfevre had just returned and once again drew the outermost gate. The 4th time this year in the most outside post. His luck really was no better than Buena Vista. It just felt like he was not entirely in shape. But this was also what made him terrifying. As mentioned before, Orfevre's signature pattern was the famous Makuli, like a video game character activating invincible mode. Once again, Orfevre began climbing up and up long before home.
3番のジャガーメイド、あとは7番の名将関白と続いて3、4コーナー中間大きながすでに過ぎました。さあビートブラックが大きく後続を引き離して石橋衆が気持ちよく16頭世界を相手の強豪を引き連れて今最後の直線コースに向かってまいりました。そしてオルフェーブルもそれを捉えるというポジションにもう早くも上がってきている白い帽子ビートブラック先頭ですが
But in the final stretch, Gentle Donut showed the spirit of a true champion. When Orfevre slid into her, if it was other fillies, they would be frightened, but she didn't hesitate at all to push him aside. As Orfevre lost momentum, Gentle Donut seized the lead and managed to hold on to that narrow advantage until the finish line. It's one of the most dramatic duels in JC. After the race, JRA reviewed the incident and ruled the result official. Without question, Gentle Donut's classic season reminded many fans of the brilliance of her father. And the story of that era did not end there. Just 1 month after, Gold Ship delivered another unforgettable moment in the Alima Kenyan from last to first. Very soon, others like Just Away, Lord Kanaloa, Phenomenal, Kizuna, Epiphania, and so many others will rise to the scene. Together, they brought the sport back to the rise. The career of a horse is fleeting, and for Orfevre, the time had come. Yet unfortunately, most of his final year was filled with blank. After winning the Osaka High, there were rumors that the team would send him to Dubai, but not Shima Classic. There was the talk of the Dubai World Cup. It is unclear of this rumor and the plan, but it never happened. There was one goal and one goal only for him. He was born for this. In the legend of King Arthur, when the nation was searching for redemption across the land, he appeared and gave people that hope. He was their king, their god. But the moment he drew that sword from the stone, he must become what's furthest away from a normal human, forever bound to his fate and his tragedy. And that was the same for Orfevre. Driven by his era, he could become a king, a champion, a legend, but never a normal horse. A naughty, free-spirited horse he was. This is the weight of the Triple Crown. This was his destiny. From the moment he was crowned till the very end, he must offer everything to that destiny to claim Japan's holy grail. And in the end, he too would never finish that quest. After Osaka High, Orfevre was diagnosed with an injury. So much of his final season passed in silence. Yet his final year still left a profound imprint on many fans because it painted a more complete picture for the life of a legend. Watching a hero's origin story is exhilarating. Watching their rise to dominance is also thrilling. But rarely do we witness the final phase of a legend's career. Watch when everything they have learned begins to settle into clarity. And that was the feeling Orfevre's final year left behind. Let go and pass on to the future. Letting go of his past and leaving a path for those who would follow, so the future can use him to climb to a greater height. Because the recovery came faster than expected, Orfevre returned to France as planned, once again standing beneath the shadow of Longchamp. This time, there was a huge support from the Japanese fan. Not only did Orfevre breeze through his prep race with ease, another superstar, one of Deep Impact's finest sons, Kizuna was also coming in blazing hot. Even Orfevre's performance last year did not fully reflect the brilliance he displayed in Japan. They still believe this year is the year they got the greatest chance. That unimaginable anticipation was understandable. Looking back now, a layoff on a foreign soil, stronger competition, more tactical targeting from last time. Such immense hype was almost unrealistic. At the main race, the track had once again turned into a swamp. Honestly, Japan just sent a bolt. At the time, even Europe respected Orfevre as a major contender. And if you've been watching the discussion for the arc in recent years, you know that's very rare for them to even consider Japanese runner a winning contender. But even then, many experts were leaning toward another horse. 2013, Europe was still living in the afterglow of Franco, and there was a horse described as in Franco mode, Trev. I won't say Orfevre had a smooth trip, but you simply had to acknowledge greatness. The horse in Franco mode, in her 3-year-old, Trev honored that very statement. Beneath that brilliance, Orfevre once again watched another horse deliver her performance of a lifetime. This was his fate. This was his tragedy. That year, wherever the king led, the hearts of the people followed. When he claimed the Triple Crown, he was stripped of every piece of what a normal horse was. That year, the rain fell over Paris, each drop heavy with expectation. The dream of an entire nation weighed heavy on his shoulder. That year, beneath the grey skies of Longchamp, the king met his Camlin. For the moment he accepted that mission, it was destined to be his tragedy. But if Orfevre couldn't win the arc, then who could? In the years that followed, Japan continued to send their champions. Yet when it comes to betting, again and again they are betting on a foreign runner. But they will tell you, if Orfevre was still here, it would not be like this. A few days later, the announcement came. Orfevre would retire after the Alimakine. The 2013 Alimakine carried an atmosphere unlike others. It was his retirement race. Naturally, the popularity was high. Anyone who read the lap time should tell you, this will be an easy win. But reality was quite complicated at the time. Historically, horses came back directly from the arc rarely performed at their full strength. And this year had the reigning Arima champion Gold Ship, who was amazing at Nakayama. Orfevre also spent nearly a year away from racing in Japan. Even the team said he's probably only at 80%. His goal was simply to step into retirement safely. So with mixed reason, there was some indescribable tension going into this race. And under such tension, Ikezoe, who had been reading Orfevre far less frequently since the arc, received an unexpected letter. The letter was written by a 5-year-old boy who was terminally ill. In the letter, he wrote about how much he loved Orfevre, how he watched his race again and again. Because of the illness, the boy dreamed of the open world outside, the freedom of running, and he wanted to see Orfevre win one more time. When Ikezoe read the letter, who was a father himself, was deeply shaken. So he reached out to the boy's family and invited the boy to visit Orfevre, who had just returned from France. Later, Ikezoe recalled that day. I wore my racing uniform and rode Orfevre out to meet him. Orfevre has a habit of biting when people try to pet him, but when the little boy reached out his hand, as if he somehow understood something, he stood completely still, patiently allowing the boy to pet him again and again. Truly a tyrant with a soft heart. But reality is always so cruel. That day, Ikezoe made a promise to the boy. As the day of the race drew closer and closer, the darkness falls. The boy's condition still worsened. When Ikezoe heard the boy had passed away, with a crushing sense of hopelessness, he vowed to keep good on that promise. to win the Alimakinen, a race that symbolized dream.
質も共に超えようグランプリ有馬記念スタート。オルフェーブルのスタートはまずまずというところがすぐに後ろに下げました。後ろから4頭目追っつけていくのはゴールドシップ、後ろから2頭目最後方にいるのが TM 稲妻です。さあ追っつけて足毛の馬体ライアン・ムーアとの新コンビゴールドシップが上がっていく。オルフェーブルは後ろから3頭目の形になりました。池添健一。さあ前に行くのは結局ルルーシュかあるいは3番のカレンミロ。最後方に相変わらず TM 稲妻。さあカレンミロティック、そしてオルフェーブル動いた。ここで動いた3コーナーカーブ、赤い帽子が少しずつ上がっていく。そして初めての対決となるゴールドシップを一気に抜き去っていった。オルフェーブルいった、オルフェーブルいった、オルフェーブルいった。あと400、ラストラウンドどう飾るのか。オルフェーブル先頭に立つ、4コーナーで先頭。これがラストランなんて信じられない。
After retirement, Orfevre began a new chapter as a stallion. His children, just like their father, are special. A little too special, in fact, that there are simply too many unique stories among them. Many of them inherited the family tradition, golden spirit. Unpredictable, troublesome, but always lovable. If you want to explore their story yourself, they are great hidden gem to be found. Chances are, somewhere in the comment section, someone is already sharing, but beyond their free-spirited nature, if there is one word that truly defines his children, it will be growth. Even if you fall one step behind, perseverance never grows in vain. Take Lucky Lilac for example. Competing in the same era as Amon I, was she really lucky or unlucky? One stood at the very top, only to be defeated again and again afterward, her career slipping into a long and painful slump. And in the end, she climbed all the way back to the summit. Her entire career became a story about never giving up. Then there was Marshall Rain, the first Japanese horse to win a foreign G1 on dirt that inspired the future. I still remember reading an article at the time saying, now that the D-Step had been conquered, Japan's next target must surely be the Dubai World Cup and the Breeders' Cup Classic. Looking back today, both of those had now been achieved. And remarkably, the Dubai World Cup was claimed by another son of Orfevre. Back then, because of the success of Marshall Rain, many of Orfevre's progeny began transitioning to dirt. Among them was a horse named Ushba Tesoro, a horse no one paid any attention. By the age of 5, he had only 3 career wins before switching to dirt. But from obscurity to the top of the world, all it took was 6 months.
Here comes Ushba Tesoro with a rush on the far outside. Algiers to catch. Ushba Tesoro gains in, goes by. Ushba Tesoro hits the front. Ushba Tesoro wins the Dubai World Cup for for Japan.
Somewhere online, either on YouTube or Nico Nico, I remember a fan who had been supporting Wushba when he was still just a modest horse. His reaction of him winning Dubai World Cup, that excitement was the kind of feeling only the people who lived through it can truly understand. But Wushba is also a charming horse that inherited the most iconic part from his family. This was what he looked like during career, and this is what he looks like now after retirement. Even if you begin one step behind the others, effort will always find its season to bloom. This is their common theme and what makes his children unique in their own ways. But their stories are for another time. Having said all of this, I hope I have managed to convey the charm of Orfevre and the emotion he once brought to so many. The reason he was able to capture the Triple Crown in 2011 and became a symbol of hope was because of his overwhelming ability. But great horses will always appear as the time moved forward. What made him a name recognized even by people who don't follow racing in Japan is because the emotion behind this horse had already gone beyond the sport itself, capable of moving the hearts of every generation. They rise, they believe, they remember. Wherever the king leads, the hearts of the people will follow. Spread the name of the king and tell them